Patterson Foundation
strengthens people, organizations, and communities by focusing on issues that address mutual aspirations,
foster wide participation, and encourage learning and sharing.
My name is Leah Verier-Dunn, a consultant with the Patterson Foundation and your host today as we discuss Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, A Walk to Respect. Joining me today is the multi-talented Beth Duda, director of the Suncoast Campaign for grade level reading and playwright of this wonderful one-act play. Thank you for joining me today, Beth.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to go all the way back to the beginning. Where did this come from? How did this initiative begin?
In 2020, the Patterson Foundation was celebrating its 10th anniversary, and we were brainstorming on different ways to mark the occasion, ways that would embrace the values and the mission of the Patterson Foundation. And you may be aware that there is a connection between the Patterson Foundation and Abraham Lincoln. The Medill family bought a newspaper in Chicago effectively to get Abraham Lincoln elected president. And that family, descendants, James Patterson was one of the descendants of that family. So when we opened Patriot Plaza, we actually had an Abraham Lincoln character actor who came and read some of the quotes, and it was very moving and really framed the experience in history. So as we were thinking about the 10th anniversary, the name Abraham Lincoln kept coming up. We were celebrating the anniversary right around February. And it seemed to me to be a little tone deaf to be approaching African American History Month and having only Abraham Lincoln present. So I just started thinking about, who were the African American heroes that I admired in the same way that perhaps I admired Abraham Lincoln, and just did a deep dive. And Frederick Douglass was one of the names that I researched. And as I was going through just volumes and volumes of information, I saw a caption in the Smithsonian Institution magazine that said that Mary Todd Lincoln had gifted Abraham Lincoln's favorite walking stick to Frederick Douglass as a tribute to their friendship. Now, I didn't even know they knew each other. I had no idea that there was a friendship, certainly not a friendship that would have resulted in a gift like that. So that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole. Yeah. So it changed what we were thinking about doing. When I spoke to Deborah Jacobs, our president and CEO of the Patterson Foundation, about some of the things that I was discovering, she was all in and really recommended that I just follow the path and see what happened as a result. I was scheduled to attend a conference in Washington, D.C. soon after I had discovered the thing and realized that the actual walking stick was at the Frederick Douglass home outside of Washington, D.C. His home is a National Historic Site, Cedar Hill. So I arranged on one of the days that I was attending the conference to go to Cedar Hill, and I had a tour of the house and saw not only the walking stick, but the note that Frederick Douglass had written to Mary Todd Lincoln to acknowledge it. And that's what started the path to discover how they knew each other, when they met, what that meeting was like. And it led to this, I think, very educational yet meaningful and heartfelt play about these two men and how they came together.
What, in your creative process from all of that research, to, till the end result, what were there certain outcomes that you were aiming for so that it felt like it aligned with, the aspirations of the Patterson Foundation?
So it seemingly magically fell into place, as I find the creative process very often kind of leads you to that. I think early on, I discovered that Frederick Douglass had written many, many very disparaging articles about Abraham Lincoln. The two of them had very different ideologies, although both were anti-slavery. Frederick Douglass believed it should be ended immediately. Abraham Lincoln was quoted in saying that it would die a natural death over the course of 100 years. Frederick Douglass especially was very pointed in his criticism of Abraham Lincoln. So the thought that the two of them would meet and become friends seemed unusual to me. But they did so in a way that really embraced respect, modeled civil discourse, modeled deep listening to each other, even when they were presenting ideas that were in opposition to each other. And I think that's something that resonated with me, certainly, with the state of the world that we are currently living in, and luckily has resonated with many other people as they hear about this story and see the way that these two men were able to put country above self, and come to understand it.
It seems so aligned with the spirit of the Patterson Foundation. It makes me think of our new Civic Path book circles when we were talking about how to be in the same room with someone who feels really different from you and be able to still accomplish something or find a common aspiration, and be able to keep yourself turned outward to help strengthen or create change in your community. It sounds like their friendship really found a way of doing that, and maybe we could all learn something.
I think we all can learn something from them. And there is also something about the distance that 160 years of history gives us, where things today can feel very immediate and very like there's no way, but if you think about the conflict of slavery and the very real trauma of the Civil War, these two men met at the height of the Civil War, and they were not great renowned historical figures at that time. They were both men who were trying to do their very best for a country that they loved. And that meant being able to find those common aspirations. And maybe as important, or maybe more important, was to truly listen to what the other was saying and to intuit what they were feeling and the importance of that. And I think the way they both approached that first meeting left both of them changed.
And deep listening is a hard thing to do when you have a strong opinion. So what a wonderful lesson for us to learn through the lens. And like you said, the space of the time between when they existed and when we are existing does give us a different sort of ability to look in and not feel so, connected in the sense that it we're able to sort of look at it with more objective eyes and listen with more objectivity, which I think, can help everybody. I know that this is not a completely traditional play in the way that it is set up. So help me understand what is unique about this experience.
Well, I think the first thing that is unique is we present it as a staged reading. So the actors, there are three actors. There's an actor that is portraying Abraham Lincoln. There's an actor that is portraying Frederick Douglass, and then there is a spoken word poet who also serves as the narrator. And every word that Abraham Lincoln speaks in the play and every word that Frederick Douglass speaks in the play are words that they actually spoke or words that they wrote in speeches. So I, as a playwright, am not putting any words into the mouths of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, because that would be just not something that I would do. But the poet allows us to get a contemporary look and a contemporary feel on the story that is being told. We specifically chose to do it as a staged reading so the audience doesn't lose sight that these were words that actually came from
that historical context.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then the one-act experience is just under an hour. We give a slight break to the audience for anyone who might have to leave for whatever reason, but then we convene a panel discussion immediately after the play to talk about what the audience experienced, what the themes are in the play, and without blame, try to talk about what it would take for us to show that same commitment to civil discourse and deep listening. And, the only way for us to come together is if we leave room for people to come
in.
To come to us.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
that half-hour discussion that happens right after the play is very rich and very full, and has renewed a belief in myself that people want to come together and they want to be able to create the world that they most want to live in.
I couldn't agree more, and I really have always been a believer that the arts, and most especially performing arts experiences, are an avenue for the patrons to, become curious, to question, to really get their minds sort of in a thinking space, and also to provide space for challenging conversations to happen. The arts can disturb a little bit, and I think that's a good thing. And how supportive of you to be able to then offer them this space to have that conversation, so that they can leave there maybe feeling like they know what to do next, or feeling charged to have a difficult conversation they haven't been willing to have yet. What sort of feedback have you gotten from the different audiences? I know you've shown it in a few different places now.
We have. We've had the honor of showing the play, certainly locally in Sarasota, but we also traveled and were able to present the play at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Arts in Washington, D.C. We presented it with the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute for American Democracy in Phoenix. We did several shows in Phoenix. We traveled to the Miller Center in Pennsylvania, Reading, Pennsylvania, and did the show there. And this past year, we're able to present it as a plenary at the Exponent Philanthropy Conference in Columbus, Ohio. And, when you think about the diversity of all of those audiences, it's been striking that the conversations following the show have been very similar. And, we've presented to primarily wealthy audiences. We've presented to economically challenged audiences. We've presented to audiences of, every color of skin. And what we have found over and over again is this yearning that people are expressing to be able to find commonalities and to be able to work through differences. And I think most people are very clear-eyed that we are not going to agree on everything. But also that being willing to listen to the reasoning and the whys and the experiences of other people can cause our, viewpoint to change and to evolve and to be morphed into something that is more welcoming. And I think that's important for all of us. If we're not evolving, what are we doing?
What are we doing here?
If we're not learning and allowing the experiences and the opinions of others to color and inform us, then, are we truly living the lives that we're meant to live?
And I think about the different communities that you've gone into, and after being able to witness something like this play and then participate in the conversation like this, how much that must strengthen the connective tissue of that particular region. Because when we, cross that threshold of being able to talk about the hard things, suddenly it creates a lot more connectivity, because we're not, I think there's still hopefully a sensitivity that remains in how you're dealing with or talking to each other, but it's like you chopped down the hard thing and now we can just talk about stuff.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the phrases that becomes important in that panel discussion after the show is without blame. That nobody believes that they're the villain of their own story. And so being able to, again, deeply listen and, why do people feel the way they feel? And, why do they have a very strong opinion about something? And if you can pull back the layers, I think that's where we get to the common aspirations. And many times I think fear presents itself before anything else, and working through that fear so that we can use our whole brain, that we're not in the fight or flight.
Absolutely.
That we can come to a deeper understanding and allow others their full humanity is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So with this initiative, it's sort of has just crossed over these several years, and it seems to pop up sometimes. And I know that in August of this year, 2026, it's going to be shown at the Glenridge Performing Arts Center in Sarasota. Is there a goal for it to continue to be shared, or does it seem to sort of depend on when the spirit moves you?
Well, so let me say, we are not a theatrical company, and we are not looking to, put this show everywhere. However, we do believe that the show can be very useful, especially in communities that are looking to bridge the gaps or truly actively working to break that narrative of us being a divided nation. We seem, since 2020, to be presenting this live about once a year, but we are very fortunate. We have a taped version of the show that was taped at the Kennedy Center when we were there, and we have been able to share that with communities with Zoom discussions with the actors and playwright afterwards. So we've found a way that we can share this with others. We are doing it here locally, but it's in preparation. We've been invited to present as a plenary of another conference in Indiana. So we're warming up here and then taking it on the road to Indiana and presenting it there. So we're excited about the opportunity, and I think for all of us that are involved in the work, it's really wonderful to dip our toes back into that whole notion of civil discourse and respect and truly examine what it is we want for our communities, for ourselves, for each other.
And I think, it's timely being that it's an election year, and I think about our voter education initiative and that this, the nature of this really aligns with that, helping people feel, strong enough to say what they feel, to have a discussion with someone else, to ask questions, and like you said, chip away at that fear so that we're using our whole brains.
Our whole brains, that's
which
right.
we all deserve to use.
We're not telling anybody how to vote.
Right.
We're not telling anyone how to think. But what we're doing is we're presenting information in a way that people can take a deeper dive into their own feelings, their own beliefs, see these two men model civil discourse and ideological differences and still find a way. I mean, they did not come to complete understanding ever, but they did come to respect.
Yeah. How wonderful. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you feel is important for the listeners to know?
I think the collaboration with the show, we have been very fortunate to have wonderful actors. I do need to give a shout out to our spoken word poet, Cedric Hamid. He contributed poetry that is part of the one act play and continues to serve as the narrator for the piece. And I think that brings a dimension to it so that it doesn't feel like you're watching history as much as you feel like you're embracing your own country. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I appreciate you being here and talking about this really wonderful project, and I hope that our listeners that are local will have the opportunity to check out the show at the Glen Ridge on August 29th and 30th. But I also just want to encourage listeners to visit the website and to read more about the work you're doing. I know that there are some clips, I think, on the website that are available so people can get a little bit of a taste. And
if they want more information, they can always contact me
there you go.
The Patterson Foundation. I'd be happy to talk to them about ways they might be able to use the show to foster communication.
How wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Listeners, on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or another streaming service, to learn more and stay tuned, please visit www.thepattersonfoundation.org or use the link in the description. For those watching this podcast on YouTube, go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen to learn more or check out the description.